And thank you very much for coming along to our webinar. We're mainly doing this to record it, but thank you for coming along in person if you're here today, because that will give you an opportunity to have a chat with us and to ask us some questions. This webinar is about Design Foundations, which is an Innovate UK funded competition. And it's about what we did and what we learned from running a Design Foundations funded project. To introduce us, and by us, I mean it's myself, Francis, Michael Byrne, who's there somewhere, he might wave, you might be able to see him, and Joe. We're the Nightingale team. We also have Ina, but she's away this week. We're a small consultancy based in Beeston in Nottingham, and we work with public sector and with established companies and startups. And we provide research that informs the design of products and services. So we do interviews, focus groups, surveys, user testing, data analysis, anything that feeds into the design of new and innovative products and services. And also on the webinar today, we have the High Street experts, that's Wendy and Ophelia, and they worked with us on this project. So we'll say hi to them. And Wendy, do you want to give yourself a brief introduction there, who you are, what you do, and what your background is?
Yep, hello everyone. Yep, I'm Wendy and I am one of the High Street experts. My background is in design, marketing and branding, but I now specialise in branding for place and for retail environments. So this project, I'm looking at markets, myself and Ophelia. So I think Ophelia would like to pick it up there and give you more about that side of things.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead, Ophelia, and just give yourself a quick intro?
Yes, hi everybody. Thank you for inviting us on to speak as well, Francis. It's a pleasure. I'm Ophelia and I'm a High Street expert. I support small to medium-sized retail businesses along the High Street to do the best they can and to build their business on the retail High Street. And I also work with councils to rejuvenate their town centres.
Fabulous. I'll give a brief intro to Design Foundations and what all of that means and what the competition is about. And then I'll talk a bit about the project that Nightingale and High Street experts did together. We've just finished the project. It finished at the end of April. So we're just in the process of submitting our final claim and trying to get hold of our monitoring officer to do our final meeting. So that's wrapping it all up at the end. So we've gone through the whole thing and we'll talk about how that was and what our experiences were like. So the aim of Design Foundations is to help businesses use people-centered and systemic design. If I can move this, I can't see the design methods, laying foundations for innovative ideas with the potential to deliver significant benefits. Now that's Innovate UK's wording. Obviously, it's a little bit wordy. But we'll explain a little bit more later about what that actually means. You can apply for between £40,000 and £80,000, and the project is 100% funded. And what that means is that, unlike other Innovate UK competitions, you don't have to show that you can fund part of the project yourself. You can have all of the costs of the project funded by the competition itself. Sometimes you get 70% funding and you have to stump up the rest of the funding, but not for this one. And the aim of your project can be to improve existing innovative ideas, generate new ideas in response to a known need or opportunity, or identify new opportunities to innovate and plan how to respond to them. So all of these details are on the Innovate UK link that details everything about Design Foundations, and we'll send that link to you in an email afterwards so that you have it. You might have already seen it, but all of these details are on the Innovate UK page. And to be eligible for the project, the lead organisation must be a UK registered business of any size, and they must collaborate with at least one other UK registered organisation. So the other collaborator on the project doesn't necessarily have to be a business. It can be a university, it can be a charity, it can be anything really. But to be the lead on the project, you must be UK registered business of any size. There's a detailed applicant briefing available from Innovate UK. The link is on that QR code, so you can use your phone to just bring that up there if you want to have a look at it, but you will get it sent in an email as well after the webinar. And that is from Innovate UK, where they just go through all the details of the application. So we're not going to do too much about the technicalities of the application, though do feel free to ask questions about it if you have them. But this is more about the experience of running an Innovate UK project and things maybe to be aware of if you're considering applying. So what Innovate UK are looking for is, as well as being a collaborative project between two separate organisations, one being a UK registered business, they're also looking for evidence that you're working with design expertise. So it being a Design Foundations project, the design element is really important. And this can be from within your own organisation. So if you have designers within your own organisation, you can use them as part of the project, but you can also bring them in as subcontractors, but you must still collaborate with another organisation. Now, in the case of the project we did with High Street Experts, we were providing the design expertise, Nightingale was providing design expertise, and we were also collaborating on the project. So the company that you collaborate with can provide that expertise. You must have an innovative idea that you explore from the point of view of the people and systems involved. So it's all about the experience element of the design process, really. You can't use the funding to build a finished product or to explore the technical aspects of an idea. So you can't really look at, say, how to build an engine or how to improve the technical aspects of an app. It needs to be about the people and systems involved. And they're always looking for a coherent and compelling story that shows a clear understanding of what you're trying to do and what the outcome is likely to be. So you need to be able to explain why you want this funding, what the benefit of the funding will be, and what the outcome will be for your organisation. So I'll talk a bit about the project that we did with the High Street Experts and what our experiences were with that. So the aim of the project was for the High Street Experts to explore how they could grow their business and provide the benefit of their expertise to a wider range of markets through the design of support and tools that fits the needs of all aspects of the market system, local authorities, market operators, market traders, and shoppers. So when I say markets, it's retail markets, street markets. So that was the focus of the project. And we were looking at what tools and processes would support market operators, traders, and local authorities to improve markets and revitalise them, because they're such an important part of making sure that high streets are vital and buzzing and supporting the local economy. It was a 6-month project centred around understanding the needs of shoppers, traders, and local authorities around running and growing markets. So we broke the project down into 5 work packages, and anyone who is writing an application for this competition, I would advise you to break your project down into work packages. Essentially, a work package is just a bunch of activities that you're going to do over a period of time, maybe over a few weeks or a month. And then you break down in each work package what you're delivering. So our work package 1 was discovery. So we did interviews and a survey with shoppers, traders, and local authorities. So that was understanding the markets from the point of view of the people involved. Work package 2 was the synthesis. So we analysed the data and drew out insights. Work package 3 was ideation. We used the insights to generate ideas. Work package 4 was testing and iterating. So we tested with users and we changed the design. And we had a prototype at this point, but it was a very basic prototype. So the funding won't cover a complicated prototype or an MVP that's functional. And work package 5 is about exploitation. And this is something that Innovate UK are very keen on, understanding what are you going to do with this idea, where are you going to take it next, and how are you going to commercialize it. So we'll talk a little bit about our experiences. I'll stop sharing our screen because this is just about us as people. So we'll just have a chat about it. We'll go to Wendy and Ophelia first, because I suppose this was your baby, this was your project, and this was something that you came to us wanting to develop. I suppose to give background on where we met and everything, I was providing support on an accelerator that Wendy and Ophelia were on, and they talked about these ideas and what they wanted to do. And then they learned about the Design Foundations funding at a later stage, and we got together. We were connected by someone else, I think it was, wasn't it? And we got together and said, could we apply for this? Is it worth applying? And we decided, yes, we would apply for our sins. And we wrote the application together. We were co-applicants on the project. We were collaborators. And so we decided to go for it. And that was, gosh, early last year when we did the application. And luckily we were successful. So at the time, here at Nightingale, we actually did 4 applications because we decided to try it with lots of different organizations. And Wendy and Ophelia's was the one that won 1 out of 4. So that's not too bad considering the success rate. So I suppose Wendy and Ophelia, whichever one of you want to answer this, what was your kind of thinking around
Shall I just start? Because that's right. Excuse me. We were doing the accelerator course with Nottingham Trent University. And before we actually met Frances, we'd already been to an Innovate session where they told us about the funding, and we had some informal chats like this with tips and advice on how to apply. So we did actually apply for another market project, which we applied for on our own. So we filled in all the forms. We'd never done anything like this before. We'd done tenders for temporary contracts and that kind of thing, but I don't think anything prepares you for something the size of Innovate. Anyway, we applied for it and we didn't get that one, but we were really close. And some of our peers on the course, well, were 2 people successful, or was it just
two? They did get
successful.
I think at that point, it's worth noting that both application times were very different. The first one we applied for, they wanted a video, they wanted various other things.
That's right.
What we had to provide. Yeah, so each Innovation UK grant has its own quirky specifications, and you really have to read the small print to make sure you know what it is that you're signing up to with regards to the application process, never mind anything else. So
it's quite time consuming, isn't it?
Yeah.
But anyway, because we were so close to getting that one, and we'd then been on this other course, and we met Frances and people like her, we thought, well, we could go for this again. But this is where Frances came in, and having this collaborative partner and someone with the experience to help you do the application was a game changer, wasn't it?
It was for us, and it was definitely 4 heads were better than 2, because we all came from it from different angles, and also Nightingale had so much more experience of writing grant applications, which is a very different tone of voice to writing for a contract bid, and they want a different angle, a different perspective of your business. And also it's the weighting. It's how much do you weight towards experience? How much are you weighting in your write-up to delivery and outcomes? And it's knowing where to put the emphasis to attract attention of that person or that board of people reading that grant application, isn't it?
Yeah, and understanding some of the terminology as well, because we were a bit confused by it, let's say.
Yeah, some words meant different things to what we interpreted them as. So the word design very much meant something different to what we were used to using it as. So it was good to have that knowledge from Nightingale and Frances and Jo. They knew that, so they could guide us with our thought patterns with that.
Just to qualify that, it meant research, didn't it, in this context, really, the design element?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a slightly confusing one, isn't it? I mean, the design, with design and design foundations, their emphasis is on understanding the people and processes involved, which really does mean talking to people and going out to the situation that the innovation is going to live in, rather than just sitting and creating something. And so, yeah, I suppose there is a bit of a mismatch there about what they say and what they expect, definitely. And so obviously we're a design research consultancy, so we brought that kind of research element to it.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And I suppose from our point of view, we wanted to be involved in these projects and applying for the projects because we felt it was a good way to kind of support startups and have that grant funding to have our work put into the project, which obviously we can contribute to developing an innovation with the cost covered. So that obviously for startups and for new companies, bringing us on is often too expensive, but the funding allows that to happen and allows us to work with companies without there being that burden and that difficulty of how is it funded. So,
and at this point, it's worth interjecting the fact that the high street experts it was a baby fledgling company. I think we'd been in operation for 3 months, Wendy. With that company, we have our own individual companies,
like that,
but we'd come together to create the high street experts, and so we were sort of deemed as a startup business at that point. So it was very important that we captivated them with a project that was going to make a big difference and have a great social impact as well as economic impact.
yeah, that social impact is quite important. They want to know that what you're doing has some meaning as well as being innovative. And there's a bit of a knack, isn't there, to writing it so that you bring those things out.
yeah.
I will talk a little bit about how to craft the application. It's a skill in itself. But I suppose from the point of view of running the project, doing the project, and what you've gotten out of it now that it's finished, what do you think you gained from it?
Well, for me, we've gained personal growth as a business. We've also developed a package that we can deliver in, and it's ready to go. And we've also now got a prototype we're seeking more development support to actually create as something that is usable in the industry, that will change the front-facing operation of the industry, and support it. So it's really exciting. It's been a very good launch pad for us, really, along with all the other fallout that comes with it. So the opportunity to go and keynote speak and to talk about the project and to share findings, data, statistics that you feed into things and initiatives going forward that will also make a change for the positive.
Data is the big thing, actually, because it's given us that well, it's the difference between us saying things like we think or we feel or we have experienced. Now we have all this data that backs up the
we know now.
And it's the kudos that's come with it as well. Like you said, keynote speaking, and we've got additional contracts and positions which may have taken much longer to get without this project.
Yeah, I think it's a big benefit of it that it gives you a bit of time and space to explore an idea that you wouldn't have that time and space otherwise, where if you were trying to do it alongside other things, it would likely just get pushed to the side, wouldn't it? Whereas when you get this funding, you have to spend the money, you have to do the project, you're under pressure in 6 months to get this thing done. So it stops.
That also was a big learning curve for our business and the way we work, because we were in collaboration with another business, yourselves, and we had to be able to work together in a way very quickly that suited all of us. And I think that just slotted into place, really. And actually, Nightingale did teach us and show us new ways of planning and strategically thinking. So that was like an added bonus for us, because we've been able to apply your processes to some of the things that we're going to be doing in the future.
Yeah, and that's one of the ideas, is that with Design Foundations, you're supposed to bring on that design expertise, however you do it, as a collaborator or subcontractor, and then learn from it. And I think that is the other benefit, is that you have 6 months of time to actually learn some new skills, bring them into your business, use them, apply them, hopefully benefit for them beyond the project.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to go back to my slides now again and just go through some of the rest of what I have here, but we'll have more chance to kind of chat as well later. So just a quick bit about applying for Design Foundations, and about some things to think about, especially if you're considering it at the moment, and what to be aware of. One big thing, I suppose, is who will you collaborate with? So the fact that it's a collaborative project is a good and a bad thing, I think, in the sense that you have to have a collaborator, you have to have some other company that you're going to work with on the project. and they need to be invested in the project, because if you collaborate with somebody and they're not very interested, or they're just coming on board for no reason really, then they're going to be a drag and they're going to not actually engage with the project. But you also need to have a very clear collaboration agreement with the company that you collaborate with, because if you're both working on a project, you both should be benefiting from the project, but you have to decide in advance what that benefit is. Now, when we were collaborating with the high street experts, we're obviously coming at it from two different angles. We're coming at it as a design research consultancy. They're coming at it from developing this package of support and tools for the high street. So there wasn't really a clash in terms of our goals or our needs. We were delivering what we were delivering, high street experts were delivering what they were delivering, and as a collaboration that worked quite well. But I suppose if you were collaborating with a company that had a similar area, working in a similar area, you'd have to be really clear on who owns the IP, the intellectual property, and who is going to benefit from that solution once it's developed. You also have to know where the design expertise will come from. So you can bring on subcontractors up to 80% of grant value. Although I would say that if you did have 80% of grant value going to subcontractors, that actually might cause a problem. You might not be so likely to get funded in that case. But you don't necessarily have to collaborate with a design company. You can collaborate with a sister company or a company that can bring on other expertise, and you can bring designers or design expertise on as a subcontractor. The thing about grants, I think, that people don't always realize is grants can only cover the cost of delivering the project. So it's not like working for a client. You can't have a profit. It should just cover the costs of delivering the project, and you can't claim VAT. So if you can claim for materials, but you can't claim the VAT on those materials. That's just a technical tax thing, but it's just a thing to be aware of, that you have to cover the VAT. And obviously, if you're a VAT registered company, you claim that VAT back in the whole washing machine cycle of VAT. You really need to think about how you'll manage the project. So do you have time to deliver the project alongside any other activities? If your company is very busy, does it have time to deliver a 6-month project? Does it have the someone who can oversee the project and make sure that it gets to the end? Because you might not get there if you don't have someone who's looking after the activities. And what can happen to companies, what we've seen happen actually, is they get 3 months down the line in a project and they realize, oh gosh, we're supposed to put in our first claim and we've actually done nothing. We've done nothing for this project. We've gotten distracted by other things. So you just have to be aware of that. You also have to be aware that the grant funding is given 3 months in arrears. So you have to do 3 months of the project, then claim for what you've done over those 3 months. So you have to have enough money in your bank account to cover that 3 months before you actually get any grant money into the business. And Innovate UK will carry out checks to make sure you're an established company with access to funds necessary to complete the project. Now that's a bit vague, but I know Wendy and Ophelia, you had a bit of a scare with that one, didn't you? Where they said, oh, you have to show bank accounts and you have to show you have a certain amount of money.
Yeah, we had no idea actually that was something that we had to physically demonstrate being available in our bank account. So we had to do a little bit of shuffling around. Like I say, we were a very newly established business applying for this grant. We were fortunate enough to have our own businesses where we could invest in ourselves, but it was a bit of a shock to the system. And you have to be prepared for that to sit in your business for the full duration of the grant. Because again, you're waiting on the second claim, you're still waiting. So you do have to be prepared for that money to not be available into your other businesses or back into your own personal bank account for the full 6 months at least.
Yeah.
Just to make sure.
Yeah, and that requirement is a little bit vague, isn't it? I mean, in fairness, Innovate UK are quite supportive when it comes to figuring all of that out. So even though it can be a little bit worrying when it happens, but they are keen to give you the grant funding. They're not wanting to find any reasons to disqualify you. So they will be supportive, but it's just something to be aware of, isn't it, really, that financial element. Other grants require you to be established for a year before you can apply, such as Women in Innovation. But for this one, you don't have to be established for any length of time. but you do have to show a certain amount of financial stability when you receive the grant.
Yeah, we weren't ready for that, were we?
No, it was a little bit of a shock, but it was fine. It was sorted. It was didn't cause too much hassle in the end. I suppose it was a little bit of a worrying thing at the start, but anyway. And I suppose the things to think about if you are planning a project, these are just very basic questions to ask, to sit down with your team or who you're collaborating with. What do you want to do in your project? That sounds like a very basic question, but it's worth knowing, what do we want to achieve? What do we want to get out of the 3 months or 6 months or however long that you're doing the project for? What impact will that have on your business? And that's very important to be aware of, because you need to tell Innovate UK what the impact on your business is going to be. They want to know, why are you doing this project? What do you expect it to do for your business? What do you think the outcome is going to be? How will your business grow as a result of this? In what way is your project innovative? That's very important. So you have to show what you're doing isn't run of the mill or business as usual. It's something that you're changing or developing or growing. And again, that justifies the funding. If you can't show what you're doing or why it's different or innovative, then it potentially isn't going to get funded because they think it's not worth the funding. Check that your project is in scope. So make sure that you are fulfilling the criteria of the project. And this is a direct quote from the Innovate UK website. It's not the easiest to understand, but it must explore opportunities and ideas from the perspective of the people who will be involved with or affected by them. And all that means is you need to understand the innovation from the point of view of the customer, the user, the stakeholder, the people, the system involved, not the technicalities, not the AI, not the build, not the physical product, but the people. How many months will you need? In Design Foundations funds projects from 3 to 6 months long. So you can do a 3-month project, a 4-month project, 5-month project, or 6-month project. Generally, it makes sense to go for 6 months because you just don't want to make it too short. If you have a reason to go for a shorter project, then that's fine. But 6 months is generally a good solid amount of time to get a project done. And we found 6 months quite doable, really, in terms of what we were delivering. So that worked. What sort of budget will be required? So the funding for Design Foundations is up to 80k. You don't have to claim a full 80k. You can claim less than that if that's all you need. Obviously, if there's 2 collaborators on the project, then some of the grant funding will go towards them and some of them go towards your organization. And that's a discussion that you have to have with your collaborator about how that grant funding will be split. So that's the next question: how much of the grant will go to each collaborator and how much of the budget will go to subcontractors? So will you need to bring in other expertise as part of the project? How will you bring that in? Who will you pay for? What other people will be involved? Each application be read by 3 assessors. I know ours were read by 5, but the briefing this time around said they were only going to be read by 3. So I don't know why that's changed. Usually the assessors will have some knowledge of the area in which your project sits. So if you're doing something about retail markets, for example, like we were, ideally those assessors have some knowledge or experience in that area, so they can make a good judgment call on it. There are lots of applications for these grants. So your project needs to stand out by having a clear story that's easy to follow. So you can imagine if an assessor is reading lots and lots of projects, they need the application to be memorable and to stand out and to not be another thing that they're seeing a repetition of the same thing over and over. If you're vague or you make claims that don't seem reasonable, assessors will pick up on this. So be careful about overblowing what you're doing or saying that you're doing more than what you're doing, because assessors will be quite wise to that and say, actually, that doesn't sound true. It doesn't sound like it's going to actually happen in 6 months. And you need to provide a detailed and well-timed project plan that demonstrates the ability to deliver. So if your project is over-ambitious and you say you're going to do hundreds of things in 6 months, the assessor will say that doesn't sound true. Or equally, if you have a very small amount of stuff that you're doing within 6 months, the assessor could say, well, you're asking for quite a lot of funding, you're not delivering very much, and you do need to show value for money. So you do need to show that the funding is going to be used well to deliver a solid project. And things to bear in mind, I suppose, if you are going for an application, is that Innovate UK take a portfolio approach. So even high scoring applications might not get funded. And all that means is they like to fund projects that are in different parts of the country and in different industries. So say if they got a lot of applications from one area of the country, those will be more competitive than applications from another area that are not so, there aren't so many of, because they want to spread it out across the UK. Innovate UK provides assessor guidance for applicants. This is in the Design Foundations details. I'm just going to bring it up there briefly. It's a little bit hidden, but it is worth looking at because it tells you how assessors read each question and what they're looking for in each question. So that's quite useful because you should use that to help you to write your application. And that's a new thing. I don't think that was there when we did it, which would have been quite useful. But anyway, we managed without it. If it says in a question that you can or must or can submit an appendix, do submit an appendix. If you don't, it will disadvantage your question. And use evidence wherever you can, past research, facts and figures. Try not to make vague claims. Try to use some past research or something that's been done by the government or academic research to say this is the situation that we're working in. This is why our innovation is going to make a difference. This is how we expect it to make a difference. So be quite specific. And we can provide some help if people need it. We can provide a review of an application. So we won't write applications, but we can provide an application review with specific guidance on how to improve your answers. Obviously, there's a cost attached to that. So do have it talk to us about that if you want more details. Or we can come on board as a project as a subcontractor. And if we do come back on as a subcontractor, we will have to plan the project because we will need to say what activities we will engage in. And so we will have to lay out what those activities will be. We were a collaborator on the High Street Experts project, but we're looking to now be subcontractors rather than collaborators, just because from a business point of view, constantly collaborating on grants isn't the most sensible thing in terms of being a profitable business and being able to provide what we need to provide in terms of working with clients. But we will come on board as a subcontractor and provide the design expertise if needed on a project. And so you can get in touch with us if you would like some support. And the next thing we'll go to is questions. So do we have, if you have a question, stick it in the chat, or you can also put your hand up and we will get to you and you can ask the question in person. If there are no questions, then Michael will ask questions, and he always asks me really mean questions. So thank you, Chair, for saving me. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, by the way. Really helpful. So I have a co-founder of a small startup. We're based in London. We primarily work with housing associations, and we're sort of considering whether or not to apply for this process. So yeah, a couple of questions if I can. So one was working with the local authority, like did you need permission from whichever high street that was in before sort of submitting that application? And my background to that is that, you know, we're working with a specific housing association. We'd be the ones with a subcontractor doing the work, but you know, like how did that relationship work in the case of this project? And then more widely in terms of considering doing an application, how long does it take to sort of plan in? Yeah, I'll start with those two.
I'll answer the second question first because I actually had that down as a note and I never added it in. I would say to write an application, you need to leave a solid 3 weeks.
Okay.
And more if possible, because especially as it's a collaborative project, so whoever you're collaborating with, you need to work with them to figure out the application. And it's not ridiculously hard to write, but there's just a lot of detail involved. And so there's a lot of steps around planning what you want to do with the project, just the practicalities of what are we doing over the 6 months, costing it all out and deciding the budget for everything, deciding who's going to be involved and how they're going to be involved, and then writing all the other things about like the market outcomes and the various different things that you need. So it's there's a lot of detail even in there. There's a very short word limit on each question, which is a good thing in one way because it stops you from waffling, but it also means you have to cram quite a lot of detail into quite a short amount of time, a short amount of words, I should say. It takes a lot of editing. So usually you would write something quite long and then you would just condense it down into a shorter version to fit into the word count, and that takes a bit of time. You want to say something there, Ophelia?
Yes, I'll go back to the first question with regards to councils, local authorities, any stakeholders that you already have existing relationships with. We did a couple of things. We, once we were granted the project, we then started to reach out. We didn't talk about it before, purely because it would have been speculative, and a lot of councils and public sector bodies get very excited very quickly, and then when nothing comes to fruition, you've got egg on your face very quickly with them. So I would say wait until you're granted the project, and then I would start bringing them on board as sort of collaborative partnerships, which is what we did with a lot of the national industry bodies of retail street markets. We encouraged them to feel like they were part of the research. So that would be my answer to that one.
And just on that, sorry, go on.
Just to add there, we had good engagement from local authorities. We, Wendy and Ophelia approached lots of different local authorities who run different markets, and they were quite keen to be on board as long as they were getting some benefit from it. And there wasn't really any issue, I think, for the most. Some of them weren't interested. They just said no, or they didn't respond. But for the most part, we got a really good response, I think. People were quite keen. And the fact that it's an Innovate UK funded project, it gives people reassurance that there's a certain level of scrutiny involved. That Innovate UK have looked at your project. They've said it's worth funding. Us coming in as researchers, I think, helped as well, because we're a research organisation. So we kind of came in as an outsider to say, we're just going to ask you some questions. There isn't any kind of obligation in being involved and all of that. So I think it was relatively straightforward. The other thing I would say as well is that you can have a local authority as a collaborator on the project. So they can actually be a co-applicant, and they can take some of the funding to be a part of the research if that was suitable.
Okay, and just on that subcontractor and collaborator point, can your collaboration with another organisation be as a subcontractor as opposed to being as a collaborator? So
there needs to be, how it works for the grant funding is there needs to be a lead applicant. So potentially that would be your company, your organisation. And then there needs to be a collaborator who also applies for the funding. So you're both on that application, and you both have to provide evidence of how you're engaging in the project. You both have to give details. You're both signed up to Innovate UK. You both have to submit time sheets and do all of that grant application stuff. And you both get grant funding directly from Innovate UK. A subcontractor is just a person who comes in, delivers some of the work.
Okay.
So they don't apply. You have to mention them in your application and say who they are, but they are not part of the application process. And so you as an organisation get the grant funding from Innovate UK, and then you pay the subcontractor just purely as a person who does the work.
And is there anywhere to find design research agencies who have who are aware of how Innovate works? We're based in London, for example. So if we're looking for a London-based organisation or someone who would be willing to be that collaborator, is there a good place to find them?
Innovate UK will provide. They have a link which I think we need to find. They said if you have any issue with finding collaborators, they will help. So I think they're the first port of call in terms of finding somebody. And then I think it's worth trying to maybe put out a call for people after that. But I think Innovate UK are probably your best bet. Because I'm sure there's plenty of organizations that they have never worked, they might have the right skills, but they've never worked on a grant funded project. So they wouldn't necessarily have that skill.
Cool.
So it, depends on what you're looking for, I suppose.
Thank you. Really helpful.
Right, go on, Michael.
So yeah, I mean, just worth saying on that point specifically, the main thing is that collaborators are not making profit. So the problem can often be finding a company. If you want a company to be a collaborator, they've got to have some other skin in the game. They've got to have some reason for getting involved. Because if they're, you know, if they're purely one that sells services, then they cannot make money as a collaborator. So they cannot make a profit. And that's the key thing that can make it difficult if you're looking for someone just to come in to provide the design. Is you just got to be aware of that they, you know, you've got to find someone who actually cares about it, or, you know, has someone that they want to be involved in this, beyond just selling a service, because this isn't that. Unless you're a subcontractor, then you can just provide a service and, you know, have usual profit margins or whatever else, but it's got to be zero profit, of all the collaborators involved.
And could you have a collaborator who, you know, is only on board for like 20% of the time, or, you know, it doesn't have to be like 50-50?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be 50-50 at all. It just, the collaborator just needs to make sense, basically. So if you bring on a collaborator that is a bit suspect, I think that might ring some alarm bells. I think the collaborator just needs to be someone, an organization that makes sense to the project and can benefit from the project in some way. So I worked on projects previously as a subcontractor where the collaborator was like a local authority. So it was made sense for them to be a part of the project because they were benefiting from the outcomes of the project. Or where the collaborators were, say, like a tech company and a marketing company, and they were both working together on a project that would benefit them both in the long run because they would work together on that project in the long term. And so it was building that relationship between them, and sort of they were both getting their kind of slice of the project and benefiting and learning from the project on the understanding that in the long run they would work together. But I suppose the collaboration agreement is quite important there. You have to have a collaboration agreement with your collaborator once you start the project that says how you're working on the project together, how you're benefiting, what the long-term kind of goal of the project is for everybody.
And sorry, is that like part of the IP agreement as well? Like, do you need that in place as part of the application, or you can like finalize the details after?
Yeah, finalize the details after. So you don't have to, I mean, you should have some clarity in your application about how it's all going to work, because the assessor will be looking at it kind of, I think if the assessor reads your application and says, I don't understand how these two companies are collaborating, or I don't know what the role is of one of these collaborators, I don't know how they're benefiting from the project, then that could potentially make your project look weak. So you should consider it when you're doing it, your application, but there's nothing in the application about collaboration. You do your collaboration agreement once you're at the grant funding.
And is it arduous for the collaborator to, like, so say if we wanted our housing association to be the collaborator in the way that you mentioned local authorities, do they just need to sort of sign up to Innovate and then sort of click yes, or they need to be sort of more involved than that?
They need to be involved. So they will have some of the grant funding. So some of the grant funding needs to go towards them. So they need to be part of the budget for the project, and they need to say who's going to be involved in the project. So they need to have someone from their team who's involved in the project. And they don't have to be massively involved, but they do need to have an involvement in the project. And they, as a collaborator, they have to do all of the hoop jumping that Innovate UK requires. So, for example, anyone involved in the project needs to have a timesheet. So you need to submit a timesheet to record the time that you've spent on the project. So say if someone from the housing association was involved, they need to have a record of how they were involved, what hours they spent on different aspects of the project in a timesheet. They need to submit that and make a claim, and the claim comes directly to them then. So they need to be aware of how that's working in the organisation. Now, as a lead organisation, you could help them and support them in doing that. You could be kind of running the project and managing the project and helping them to do their timesheets and all of that kind of thing. But they would need to do it themselves at all the uploading and such, because they need to be signed up onto the portal, the IFS portal. So it's it does require some work from their point of view.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you. Really helpful.
Do we have any other questions? Are you going to be my question asker, Mike?
Yeah, go on. So I was just wondering, I think you've probably got unique perspective on this because you've obviously been involved in quite a few different grants, etc. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about what it was you think was there one particular thing, or what was the most important thing or reason that this grant actually got funded through this program? What was it about this project specifically that you think was sort of played the biggest role in making sure it got the funding?
Well, Francis, may I come in on this one a little
Yeah,
bit?
go on. Yeah.
I think that the actual industry was ready for it. I think it was identified immediately in our application, the lack of research that had been done in this particular industry. And we're at a time now where mammoth investment is being made into our high streets, and we're looking at how to evolve them and adapt them so that they don't die, but they become something that is useful for all generational purposes. And I just think it was about timing, the lack of what's been before, and the fact that it has been recognised at a higher level for investment purposes.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think it's definitely not the street market world is definitely not a world that's oversaturated in innovation or technology. So I think the assessors saw it and went, oh, this is new, this is different, this is something we haven't seen 100 times before. This could actually really make a difference, and this is an area that is ripe for disruption.
Another maybe point, Francis, was the fact that the people reading our application could all at some point identify with a market. They'd all been to a market, experienced it, good, bad and ugly, and I think they could easily get what we were trying to achieve.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think a clear story is really important. So I think that was another thing, and I think that's a really hard thing to get right in the grant application. Is your assessors there, they might have a stack of applications, however many high, they're reading them, they have to give feedback on every single question, which is a lot of questions. And so if they read the application, think, I don't really understand this, or I don't understand what this company or organization is trying to do, then it really clouds their judgment in terms of, understandably, in terms of like, they just then can't really say whether it should be funded or not. Whereas I think if you can tell a really clear story that justifies why this thing should be funded, then I think that goes a whole lot of a way to helping with the funding.
Yeah, I'll just add to that as well, because that's absolutely right. They've got to get in that first paragraph they read, they've got to understand what it's about, set that in the head before they read through the rest. But it's really important, that feedback that they do give on each question, because I said we were already unsuccessful in a previous application, but we studied that feedback that they gave us and looked at, you know, all the negatives that they brought out, and we tried to address those in this new application that we made. So, you know, we did learn a lot from that first one. Even though we did get it, it was very helpful with this one. So they do take the time to answer the questions and you know, report back on anything that you might have done better or things that you've missed out.
Yeah, that
Very
feedback's
good
really
feedback.
helpful. Yeah. Do you have another question, Chair?
Yeah, I do. I also wanted to ask about thank you, also, that's really helpful. About your work packages. So I know you had one which was test and iterate. Did you like allocate like more time to that test and iterate one, or was it sort of one cycle? Like, how did you sort of phase the work packages? Just because it's quite, you know, like test, like how long is a piece of string, basically?
It's quite difficult, and I suppose because this is our bread and butter, we do this a lot. This is what we do as a design research company. We kind of knew how long each thing would take, so we just allocated the right amount of time to it. But I suppose the thing about Design Foundations as well to point out is they are open to you changing the structure of the project once it's started. So often, not always, with Innovate UK projects, you sort of have to stick to your timeline and you have to deliver. But the difference with Design Foundations is that you can get to a certain point in the project and say, oh, actually, we've now discovered something that we should want to change direction, or we need to give more time to something. Now, obviously, within a 6-month period, there's a limited amount of time that you can give to anything, really. And so you just have to be realistic about what you can fit in and how much you can do. For us, we knew that we would be generating a basic prototype and that we would want to just expose that to the people that would be using it. We knew we wouldn't be able to do massive, extensive testing. It was more kind of bringing it out there, exposing it to the world that it would live in, getting some feedback, and then getting to the end of the project with enough knowledge to know, should we go ahead with this, or is there stuff that we need to change or add, or, you know, so there's a lot more that needs to be done with that now. It's definitely not a finished product, but it's a good start. I think that's all you can really expect, especially with early ideas. They're going to just be started really with this. In 6 months is just not long enough to do more than that, really.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Right. How are we doing for time? Few more minutes. If we have any more questions, I'm happy to answer them, or if there's anything else, Wendy and Ophelia, you think is worth kind of mentioning, or any other guidance that you would give from your side of the fence in terms of like the people who are really the drivers of the project, the lead project people.
I was just going to say,
oh
no,
go
on then, Fee.
I was just going to say that you do, if you're successful in your grant application, they do single out an advisor for you. So you have an advisor, and they have a fantastic help desk as well. So if you sort of stumble on any technical issues with the portal, or you just need some kind of hand-holding with something, Innovate UK have got a brilliant team behind them that are there for you. We have, you know, we have accessed that, and it's been really good service, hasn't it?
Yeah, I was just going to say we did have a few technical hitches with our application, well, with our claims, wasn't it, in both parts,
Yeah.
the first claim and the second one, and that got a bit frustrating, but the help desk were really
good.
Yeah, really good at responding. But it's just, I think it's useful to know that these things do happen, and you know they can be fixed quite quickly, because when you're in the heat of the moment trying to desperately submit this claim, you know, so that you don't lose out, it can be a bit worrying. But they've got a really good team there, and they get back to you within a couple of days at the most.
Wendy, there was, you know, I was the lead, wasn't I? But you were the financial lead, so we had to have a couple of posts on ours where I was the lead in the actual grant and the project, but Wendy was the financial lead and did all the financial submissions, signed her life away, and it was quite,
forecasting, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you have to forecast and project. So there's a few sort of spreadsheets to have running in the background, so that you're logging everything, not just your timesheets, but your expenses, any accrued costs, your wages, and of course your accountant or yourself will generate an end of project account page that they will need to see finances. So yeah, there's little bits like that along the way as well.
Yeah, I would say
I was going to say is, sorry, it's about you though, Fran. It's the beauty of collaborating with somebody or the subcontracting, is that someone else can keep you on track because it's a different perspective. You know, Ophelia and myself, we're really passionate about markets in high street, and we can go down a rabbit hole and you know, go off track, but having your collaborator there, so in this sense it was Francis and Joe, really keeping us on track, sticking to the project scope and keeping it simple, really, because then, you know, equally, like when we were submitting the application, you have to keep it succinct so that someone gets the project. At the end, you've got to keep the report like that as well, so the findings really stay on track within the scope of the project and they're understandable. So that collaboration is important for that as well, isn't it?
And for most of it, our collaboration was virtual. So to me, you could be worlds apart. You could be in a completely different area of the UK and still collaborate with somebody that knows that grant inside out and can support you on every stage of it. So not just the delivery of it, but that sort of background paperwork, the administration of it, which could feel quite onerous without somebody who knew what they were doing.
It is a bit fiddly. I would say though that Innovate UK are very supportive. I mean, they are
Yeah.
what they do want to give you the grant. There's
They
no
are
reason
good.
for them not to. So they will help you through if you are having a bit of difficulty. And the other thing I suppose to say is that you are assigned a monitoring officer or a monitoring service provider, and when you get a grant, and their job is to make sure that you're delivering the grant. And they meet with you at your halfway point. They meet with you at the end, and they are kind of checking up on you, for want of a better way of putting it, but really they're there to support you, to make sure that you're doing what you said you were going to do, you're delivering on the project, and that then kind of feeds into whether your funding gets approved or not. So if you find yourself getting 2 or 3 months into the project and nothing's happening, you will then struggle to actually access the funding. And sometimes, you know, organizations apply for funding and don't get it, or they secure a grant but they actually don't get the grant because they don't deliver the project. So it's definitely something to be aware of, is that management of the project is really important, making sure it actually happens and it doesn't get put on the back burner and it doesn't get forgotten, and time doesn't drift before it starts happening. We have been on projects before as a subcontractor where the project's gotten a little bit out of control or has drifted, but we've been able to speak to Innovate UK and say, look, yes, there's been a bit of a time lag on this one. It's fine. We're getting it back on track. And usually Innovate UK will say, okay, you know, don't let it get too much out of control. This is, you know, obviously in situations where you're not gone completely off track. And they'll just say, make sure you get everything done. And once, you know, you can move things from one work package to another if needs be. There's a certain amount of flexibility. You can also apply for a project change request. So if you want to change the project in a significant way, you can ask to change the project. And as long as there's a reasonable reason behind that, they will allow you to change. But you just have to ask them for that first. And that's like a major change. Like, you were going to look at this area, but actually now you want to look at something different. You need to justify that quite clearly. Right, I think that covers everything that we were going to cover, and we're at the time. So thank you very much everyone who came along, and obviously the recording will be available next week, and we'll send lots of details as well with this, lots of the different links. And if we can be of help or provide any support, do get in contact, and good luck if you do apply for the grant, and hope that this time next year you're working on it, or you'll be finished with it, I suppose, this time next year. But good luck anyway if you do decide to apply.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's
been a really
absolutely
helpful
worth
session.
it.
Yeah, I think it is.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks.